Hi, this video to explain the FHIR Bridge, the internal structure, the resources that you can find in the repository, etc. So it's just a basic introduction to the FHIR Bridge. The FHIR Bridge architecturally is a broker. It's just it's a system that sits in the middle. So this is the FHIR Bridge. We'll expose some interfaces here, and some clients will use those interfaces. I will put the sign of using those interfaces. So here we have clients, and these clients will send data, so they will create resources, and they will query for data, so they will also search. So they will create resources, they will send the resources using the FHIR format for the resources with some data. It could be vital signs, laboratory test results, or whatever. The FHIR Bridge takes the FHIR, this is all FHIR format on this side, takes those resources in and transforms those resources into openEHR compositions. So from this side will be all openEHR. In openEHR compositions are clinical documents, basically, in JSON format. So here FHIR could be JSON XML. We are using JSON right now. On this side, it is openEHR format, is also JSON. We could use XML, but it's JSON right now, JSON only. So it's like a JSON to JSON transformation. Inside, we are not working really with JSON. We are working with objects that are parsed from the resources. So here, when we receive the resources, we already receive the resources parsed to an instance of a class. The class will be the one that corresponds to the type of resource. So here we could have an observation. Here we can have a procedure, for instance, and all the internal data is already set on those class instances. The model for these classes is in FHIR. So the FHIR Bridge uses FHIR inside. FHIR is one of the libraries, that is used to expose the interfaces, to parse the format, the JSON format, to the classes, and some other validation stuff. So this is FHIR, includes that part. Then the openEHR is also classes that we use. So there are many types of different compositions on this side, and each composition will depend on the type of data that we want to represent in that clinical document. So we have compositions for representing each of the resources that we receive on the interface. Each of the FHIR resources. I will show you in a second which resources we support right now. So these are transformations in the FHIR Bridge, transformations from one class to another class. So we transform really FHIR classes into or instances into openEHR classes or instances. Then there is a component here at the end that actually takes those classes and that does the serialization to the openEHR format. So there is one component here that does the parsing of the JSON that we receive on the request to FHIR classes, and then the openEHR classes are serialized to JSON to send that to another system. The other system here is could be any openEHR server. Right now we are using EHR base. So this is EHR Yeah, it's any openEHR server, but we are using EHR base. Yeah, and the EHR server, what the servers that are compliant with the openEHR API, they offer a service to commit a composition. So this is the commit here service. Yeah, so the FHIR Bridge uses the commit to send the data to the EHR base, yeah, using the openEHR format. And inside here, it also receives the data, it parses the data, validates the data, blah, 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 and then stores the data into a database. Yeah, so the server has is a repository and manages the data in the database. Yeah, the FHIR Bridge lately supports also a database here, and this database is for storing the logs or the events of receiving requests and logging the resources that we receive, just for to have control on the communication, on the data that we receive. Because what happens if on this side, this server is not available? This will, if we don't save the data, it will be transformed, and then this is stateless. So the communication will fail and we will lose that data. Yeah, so we are now having some storage also on the FHIR Bridge. That is the basic architecture, and this is built on Spring framework. So this is Spring Boot. Yeah. So it's Happy FHIR, Spring. Yeah, basically those two. And these classes here, the openEHR classes, yeah, are generated from openEHR templates. Yeah, there is that the templates are the document definitions in openEHR. It's like a FHIR profile, but in the openEHR world. And for generating these classes, we use the SDK generator, the openEHR SDK generator. That is another component. Yeah, it's not included in the FHIR Bridge, but we use that to generate these classes and then include the classes into the FHIR Bridge. Yeah, so it's I would say it's a soft dependency to that library. Yeah, it's a command line tool. Yeah, this is the basic structure, yeah, and the technology that we depend on. To test or to execute or test the FHIR Bridge, you need the EHR base running, yeah, because each test or when the FHIR Bridge is used, you need to send the data to the backend. It will do that on the same flow. So when it receives the data, it will transform and send the data to the backend, to the EHR base. Yeah, if it's not running, it will get an error here, but we'll store, here the data in the local database. Yeah, so that those transactions are not really lost. Yeah, what we don't have right now is an idea of which clients we will use the FHIR Bridge. Yeah, this is just to expose that. One extra comment is because the FHIR Bridge doesn't have the notion of an EHR. The EHR is the container of all the clinical documents for one patient. Yeah, for each patient will have an EHR. Since the resources that we receive here on the left have a reference to a patient, that patient should exist. In this context, it means that the EHR for that patient should exist in the backend, in the EHR base. Yeah. So first, before starting sending the FHIR requests, someone has to use the create EHR service. So these are create EHR here, that is part of the openEHR API, and should create, actually, let's say this is one of these components, should create the EHR for that patient. But the notion of an EHR is not in FHIR. FHIR is for sending individual data sets, yeah. So that is why we don't use the FHIR Bridge to actually create EHRs for the patients, yeah. And this EHR creation might happen before the FHIR Bridge is used. For example, when we are enrolling new patients in the whole platform, yeah. So when you create a new patient in the platform, you need to create the EHR for that patient in the platform, yeah. And after that, you can start using or the openEHR interface directly, this one, or the FHIR Bridge if you want to use FHIR clients, yeah. But you can always, a client could use the commit service of the EHR base directly, yeah, or any EHR server that you have in the backend, yeah. The FHIR Bridge was created just for the clients that use FHIR for sending data, yeah. So with that done, let's check the project. So the project is this, is on EHR base, FHIR Bridge. Let's take a look at the contents, yeah. So you can find here in source, if we go to test folder resources, here you will find some configuration files. These YAML are configuration files, yeah. You don't need to touch them to run the FHIR Bridge. Then you will find some Insomnia files. The latest one will be the valid one, yeah. Insomnia is a REST client, basically used for testing. It runs on Linux, Windows, whatever, yeah. So I use this for testing the FHIR Bridge manually. When I want to execute specific flows, I go to Insomnia, I just click on some requests and I check the results, yeah. So that is functional, I would say. It's functional integration tests. And then the other folders, what they contain is data examples of the resources. So this is basically what we will use to send data from this side, yeah. So FHIR Resources for the create this endpoint, yeah. So for example, if I go to the observation, and these are organized based on the type of resource. So this in FHIR you have condition resources, diagnostic report, observation procedure, questionnaire response, etc. There are more resources, but these are the ones that we use right now. So if you go to observation, and we have a lot of observations because we have a lot of vital signs, you can see a blood pressure, body temperature, coronavirus result, example of oxygen, inspired oxygen, heart rate, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and if you go to one of these examples, these are examples to test sending data to the FHIR Bridge and then mapping and sending that data to the EHR base. Yeah, you can see the data is here for the body temperature, the blood pressure, and you can see here in the value quantity, this is the systolic, because you have this is complex structure. You have two values, systolic and diastolic, for the blood pressure. So these have components. This is the systolic part, and this is should be the diastolic part. Yeah, this part. This is the value, one value, and this is the other value. Yeah, we use those resources from the integration test to send data to the FHIR Bridge and check that data is there mapped correctly. Yeah, I will show you the test in a second. So those are the examples. We need to create more examples like this for quality assurance. Yeah, so this is a source, test, resources, and then each type of resource, and then you will find the examples. And all the examples are JSON right now. We could add, XML. If you go to the main, In the test, if you go to the code instead of the resources, let's go here. You will find one single file, one single class that is the implementation of all the integration tests. Yeah, and if we open this one, I will show you just one test, how that is implemented. One comment about the setup. The setup is actually connecting to the FHIR Bridge, because this is like a client of the FHIR Bridge for testing the FHIR Bridge and then checking if the data is stored in the EHR base. When we start, what we are doing is, this is some code also to create the EHR on EHR base for a test patient. Yeah, and the test patient will be identified by this ID. This is just a generated ID, but we create an EHR and we commit that EHR to EHR base. So it's basically this arrow here is doing this, create EHR, first before starting anything. So with the setup done, we know that we have an EHR for the patients that are inside the examples. And if I go to the, to go back to the examples, the part that we use of the example to reference the patient is the patient part. Is the subject, this. So this is the ID of the patient. Since we generated the ID of the patient in the test, what we need to do is to take the example and to change this value with the value that we created for the test in the test setup. So you will see some code to actually change that value. So for example, create condition will load the example, is one of those examples, and then with this line will change that ID with our ID, with our internal patient ID that we created in the setup above. So it will change this value that is hard coded here. And it's just doing a replace in the string, because it reads the JSON, but it's a string, it's not parsed. And this line will actually execute the create in the FHIR Bridge using that resource. So internally it will, if needed, parse the resource, do whatever it needs to do, and send that resource to the FHIR Bridge. And then we check some conditions over the result of that operation of the create. This is the result of the operation, and this is really checking that the logs for that operation were stored in the FHIR Bridge. The logs are the ones that are stored in this database that I mentioned before. This is the database for the logs for all the operations that are executed in the FHIR Bridge. So it's checking that the data was sent and the response is correct, but also that the data was stored in the FHIR Bridge. This is the part to check that. It's not much. It could check more, detailed information, but it's pretty basic right now what we have. So that is all about the test part. And for the main part, the application part, let's go to the resources first. So here you will find several resources that we use in the implementation. So you will find some configuration files. These are the configuration files used not for testing. The configuration files for testing are under source test resources. These are the configuration files for running the FHIR Bridge. And here there are two important folders. Messages is not so important, it's used internally. This has just some translations. Static also is not so important. Profiles is important, because here it contains all the FHIR profiles supported by the FHIR Bridge currently. The profiles are all in the XML format and should contain all the data. should not be just the diff of that profile with the source resource. Should be the snapshot. The snapshot, what it does is it takes the definition of the resource, of the original resource, takes the definition on the profile that is actually adding more constraints to the resource, merges those definitions together and creates one file. These files are created that way. Yeah, should contain all the information of the original resource plus the constraints added by the profiles. Yeah, and these are the ones that we support. We have a lot of vital signs and some stuff related with laboratory results for COVID. Yeah, so you can see heart rate, procedure, body temperature, SOFA score, blood pressure, etc. And we will add more resources here. Yeah, more profiles. Yeah. So remember, this is the snapshot version. Yeah. To know where the snapshot version is, for instance, let me show you what we are, from where we get those profiles. We get those profiles from Simplifier and from this project. Yeah, and if we go to profiles, you go to, for example, blood pressure. That is one of the profiles that we have. And you can see here download on the top. And you can download the JSON or XML. And you can download the snapshot version, XML or JSON. What we are using right now is the snapshot as XML. That contains, as I said, the merge of the original resource plus the profile. This is the complete definition. Yeah, and we use just XML versions. So there you have from where to get the profiles. And then there is another element because we need to map. Let's go to the diagram. We need to map FHIR resources that are compliant with some profiles. So you know that the profiles are in the project. So we have here a folder with profiles. But then openEHR, the openEHR compositions are also defined by something that are those elements are called templates, openEHR templates. So there is also an element here that are templates that are the definitions of the composition, and the profiles are the definitions of the resources. And the templates, the full name is operational templates. So you will see in a lot of places operational templates or OPTs for operational templates. All the three words are the same thing. Yeah, just templates. And you can see here the folder is OPT actually. And here we have the definitions of the clinical documents in the openEHR model. Yeah, so you will see here that we have almost the same concepts as we have in the FHIR profiles. Yeah, so for example, let's open the procedure just for fun. So we have also a procedure profile. Yeah, or the procedure. Maybe I think the procedure is one of the resources that we don't have a profile for. Yeah, we are using the base. It's not a good example. We are using the base resource alone. We are not using a. Let me check that. We are not using a profile for that one. Let's go to main, resources, profiles. No, we have a procedure one. I think the condition is the one that we don't have. Yeah, the procedure, we have a profile and we have a template. Yeah, this is the procedure template. For the condition, we don't have a profile. We are using the base resource. Yeah, but we have a template that represents the condition data in openEHR. And this is just an XML. The OPTs, the templates, operational templates, are just XML files, and also define some kind of constraints over a base model. The base model is the openEHR reference model. Yeah, we don't need to go into detail about this, yeah, because it's managed internally and is on the on this side of the application of the FHIR Bridge. So I think what we need to do is to focus on the left side, yeah, for testing purposes. Yeah, we will do stuff here, not on the right side. If we need to do an introduction on openEHR, we can do that, yeah, separately. So just for you to know, these are the templates and where the templates are in the project, yeah. And if we go to the code, those are the resources. And if we go to the code, the first thing that you need to know is where to find those interfaces that are implemented in the FHIR Bridge. So these interfaces that we offer and are for creating resources and for searching resources, you will find those interfaces in here, main, Java, blah, 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 FHIR Bridge. And if you go to FHIR provider, you will see here that we have the type of resource provider. So we have condition resource provider, diagnostic report resource provider, observation resource provider, procedure resource provider, etc. Yeah, those are the types of resources that we have. And if you go to, for instance, observation resource provider, you will see that we have some operations. We have some operations that are search operations. We have some operations that are just looking at the annotations. We will have create, yeah, and this is the one that we want. This is to create a new resource. Create, what it will do, it will receive the observation, yeah, and you can see here the observation is already parsed. So the part of receiving the JSON and parsing to an observation class, it's an instance of that class, is done by the framework, by the FHIR. Here we just received the parsed observation. So is basically this box here that we received the observation, yeah, it's already parsed. We don't deal with JSON or XML, yeah. And here some validation over that observation is done. For example, to check if that observation complies with the supported profiles or not. If we don't support this observation, with this kind of observation or the profile that this observation is complying with, we will reject that observation, yeah. And this code here is saving the first log, yeah, on the database, on the FHIR Bridge database. So we'll use this database to save a log that we received an observation. Then it will check the profiles that we comply with, and we'll do mappings depending on the profile, yeah, because the profile defines the internal structure of that specific resource. So for example, if we have, let's find one that is very simple. For example, body temperature. Let's say that the observation is compliant with the body temperature profile. The mapping to openEHR is actually implemented in another class. So this class here implements the mapping. So it receives a FHIR observation and returns an openEHR composition. Yeah, so this arrow is implemented here. I won't show you the little details about the transformations. Just think about that as a black box that takes a FHIR object and returns an openEHR object. Yeah, this class that is the specific type of composition is the one that is generated from the SDK. So this specific class is generated by this component that I mentioned before. Yeah, and you can see that all the mapping lines, this, for example, you can see that class, and this, for example, you can see there is a different class of composition. Yeah, all these classes are generated, auto-generated from the templates, from the openEHR templates. Yeah, have all the data to generate these classes. Yeah. So we work with these classes in memory, and then when these classes are complete, we send those instances to those objects. I would say object instead of class and instance. Those objects are sent to the EHR base using this EHR base service. So we use a save operation that is just a method. We send the composition, but we need to tell to which EHR this composition will belong. That is why we need for the patient in the resource to have an EHR in EHR base first. Yeah. So telling that we will store in an EHR here, this composition is required for this commit service, for executing this here. Yeah. So what we do here in the code, yeah, is just that with that line, we are sending the composition to that EHR and we'll return something. What is returned here is the ID of that clinical document, of that composition in the EHR server, in EHR base. Yeah. And we can then use that ID to get that from that document from EHR base if we want. Yeah. If everything goes well with the transformation, this won't fail. Yeah. We just try and catch some exceptions here, and then when we finish with the mapping and the committing to the EHR base, we have some log of the success operation, or if we found any issues, an exception was thrown, we have a log of the failed operation. And those logs are stored, as you know, in the FHIR Bridge database. Yeah, just as events. Yeah. And I think this audit event is actually a FHIR resource. It's also a FHIR resource. Yeah, so we are storing also FHIR stuff in the FHIR Bridge. Yeah, that is the main thing that you need to know about this. Yeah, this is to create for the search operations. If we go to the search is done using FHIR. Yeah, so we also use this interface provided by the FHIR Bridge to search. So we use this search operation. Let's change the color. This is getting messy. So we use the search operation and we send a search request and we get a bundle back. Yeah, in the case the operation was successfully executed. Yeah. For implementing these search operations, we receive all the parameters, and what we do internally is we create an openEHR query based on the parameters for the FHIR query, for the FHIR search. Yeah. So what we receive are some parameters here. For instance, since this is for all the observations and we support many observations, we need the specific profile. So we need to know which type of information we want to retrieve back. Observation is too generic because you can have many types of observations. Yeah. So you need to say, this is blood pressure, or this is body temperature, or whatever. Then you need to, this is a required parameter. You need to say, this is the patient that I want the information for. So currently the search is not for many patients, it's just per patient. Yeah, we could change this. Also, you can search observations by a date range. You can say I want the observations after this date, or before this date, or between two dates. Yeah. Also, if the value in the observation, only if it's a single value in the observation. This is also for testing purposes here, because, for instance, this won't work for the blood pressure because we have two different values. But for the single valued observations, you can pass a reference values. So for example, for the body temperature, you can say, I want all the body temperature measurements for this patient that are below 37 degrees or above 37 degrees. Yeah, you can say that. Yeah, the other parameter is just for testing. I did that to implement different options for searching the body temperature. Yeah, so that will be removed. So what we do is we check the profile is this, that, or that. Here we need to add more support because we have more resources. So these are the resources that are currently supported for searching that are observations. Yeah. So for this, what we do is this is a body temperature, so implement the query using this parameter. So we send the FHIR parameters to an operation that actually maps those parameters to an openEHR query. And for instance, we have here one of the search builders for the EHR base. This looks like SQL, but it's really AQL. That is the archetype query language. It's the query language for openEHR data. Yeah. Looks a lot like SQL, but it's not SQL. You can see that there are these strange paths here. There is this strange contains keyword here, so it's not the same. Yeah, but it's based on SQL. Yeah, and here what I did, because this was implemented by me, is I just get the information that I need from EHR base for a specific composition. Yeah, that is body temperature composition, and then I add the conditions of the conditions over the subject ID, that is the patient ID. And if we receive date range conditions, also we use the date range. If we use the quantity, the reference quantity, we also map the conditions over the quantity, and that's it. That is executed. This is the query builder, and this is actually executing the query in EHR base, getting the results back. The results will be openEHR classes, openEHR data. So these types, for example, DB datetime and DB quantity, are openEHR types. And what I'm doing here is I'm going through all the results in the result structure, and I'm mapping the results and the values contained on those classes to a FHIR resource that is an observation. Yeah, so I'm mapping back from openEHR to FHIR. So this is actually executing a query, getting the results. So here we offer another service that is query AQL. Yeah, this is query, and here the mapping in the other way is done. So here we have openEHR classes or objects, yeah, and are mapped back to FHIR objects, and those FHIR objects are put in a result structure that is basically a bundle. Yeah, so the result should be a bundle. So it's a list, yeah, and that list, when it's returned from the provider, it is automatically serialized to a bundle. Yeah, so we don't work with JSON. The FHIR library does the work of serializing that to a bundle resource. Yeah, and the user or the client is getting that bundle. Yeah. So that is the basic flow for searching. Yeah, so it does the map in the other direction. So search is executed in FHIR, that gets the results, maps to a query. The query is executed in EHR base. We get the results in openEHR. We map those results from openEHR to FHIR, and we send those resources back as a bundle to the client. Yeah, So we have bidirectional there, but not all the profiles and the resources are mapped back for the search. Yeah, the search is not supported for all the resources. That is what we might need to work in the near future. Yeah, so this is the basic flows that we have, the architecture, some references to the code. You can then read the rest of the providers here. You can find them here. And if you want, you can also check, for instance, these in the OPT folder package in the project. We have all the generated classes. These are generated from the templates using the SDK. Yeah. Mapping is just the classes that are used for mapping FHIR resources to openEHR and back from openEHR to FHIR resources. Yeah, all that logic, the transformation logic, is here in mapping. Config are just classes that are related to configuration and internal utils. And REST, yeah, this is, for example, the EHR-based service is the interface that we use to communicate from the FHIR Bridge to the EHR base. So it's basically this interface here. Yeah, this service handles the operations on the left side, and on the right side handles the request to the EHR base. Everything is REST also on this side, on the openEHR side. Yeah, so that is all the code that we have. It's not a huge project, but has a lot of little flows and a lot of logic for handling the mappings, and has this extra complexity that we use an external tool to generate the classes. Let me show you where to find that tool. The SDK is actually on the same base organization. If you go to openEHR SDK here, you have the HR base there also. Here, this project is like a bundle of many different tools. The generator is the tool that we use to generate those classes. Yeah, so it's basically a command line tool that you can execute. You can pass one of the templates that we have, the openEHR templates, as a parameter there, and you will get a bunch of classes. And those are the classes that we include then in the FHIR Bridge project. So it's good that you have knowledge about this component. Yeah, that's it. If you have any questions, just let me know. But that's it, how everything works. Hope this is useful for you. See you later. Bye-bye.